Welcome to our broadcast. I'm your host, Michael Lange, and this is Oakland Is. Today we're going to have the opportunity to revisit with the Oscar Grant murder, which took place about 2 years ago, January 1st, 2009. With me is Minister Keith Muhammad, who has been with this process of the burdensome trial. He has been in attendance in the courtrooms. He has been in the public debates all across the Bay Area and across the state of California. And as a result, one thing that came out of this was a book called Oscar Grant, Grant Justice, Lessons Learned Fighting for Justice in the Murder of Oscar Grant. So I want to welcome you to the broadcast. It's always good to have you on the show and to gather the wisdom and see what is really going on here and what is the latest situation with regards to Oscar Grant.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. You know, you've been very consistent, and it's probably all of that part of the 2 years. I mean, how do you find the stamina to get up and be, keep the dynamic tension regarding the public's need to know about what is going on in our courtrooms or on the streets of Oakland? How have you been faring with your health and your wellness?
Well, I think the most important element here is love.
Okay.
Jesus said, "Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world." So if anyone would wonder, how is it that so many that we have admired have been able to continue their stand? I was blessed to see last night the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as he was addressing an audience in Mississippi at Jackson State University of civil rights giants. So there receiving him were the wife of Medgar Evers and many others who are civil rights luminaries. And when I look at Minister Farrakhan, who has been in the ministry now for more than 50 years,
that's right,
and we wonder, where does he get this infatigable spirit? Well, the spirit that is in him, and I pray the spirit that drives me, is the spirit of God that comes from our love for freedom, justice, and equality.
But you have a family, you have a wife and children. I mean, there's all of that. Does it begin to all work because the whole family unit sees where the direction is heading, and then that they have to play their role as well?
Well, I would imagine, being a lover of history, that if we were to take Coretta Scott King's story, or Dr. Betty Shabazz's story, and I surely don't compare myself with Dr. King or Malcolm X, but if you would ask me about the ministry of Malcolm, well, of course, I serve in the ministry class of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad here in Oakland, and there are certain experiences that one gains from standing for your people, in some cases before we've learned to stand for ourselves, that can be very difficult. So again, at the root of our drive is love of God, love for our people, and love for the cause of justice. And that love has to be greater than the pain that can be produced by people who sometimes don't understand or do not appreciate what that struggle has been. This case in the struggle for justice for Oscar Grant presented many moments of great love and admiration, but also created dissension, difficulty, and pain. There were some, for an example, who could not understand why Muslims would stand in the gap for justice for a Christian pastor, Sister Wanda Johnson. Well, first and foremost, we don't divide ourselves from our people on the basis of labels that we just learned. So long before I called myself a Muslim, and long before Wanda called herself a Christian, we're the same. And while I don't know all of her family tree and history, and neither does she know mine, we have a common experience as a people that is actually prepared in the histories of the scripture written by God. So we should not see ourselves as different. We should see ourselves as one people serving one God whose desire it is for truth, justice, and righteousness. And on that basis, I didn't need to wait to find out what was Wanda's religion or Oscar's faith. I saw a black man shot down before the eyes of the world, and it did to me the same thing it did to you. By God's grace, in our position as students of Minister Farrakhan. As a Muslim, we have a principle called jihad, which I write about in the book. And most who hear that principle of jihad on television and in movies think holy war and terrorism. Well, with the book, we hope to correct that concept.
Okay.
The principle of jihad simply means that there's something wrong in my environment, political, social, economic, and when I see what is wrong, that I give it real thought and prayer. That's the first level of jihad. The second level of jihad is beyond thought and prayer over the egregious behavior of humanity. It's to raise my voice against that which is wrong. Now, the third and final level of jihad is beyond raising my voice to get up and do something about it.
Yes.
It doesn't do us much good to say I'm a good Christian, I'm a good Muslim, see evil in the hand of government, and don't do anything but submit ourselves to evil. If I believe in Jesus, then I stand in his name, and those that are evil, if they have a problem with my standing on right, Jesus said, rejoice, be exceedingly glad. They will do all manner of evil against you for his name's sake. And if nobody stands against you when you're standing for right, sometimes you've got to question, am I really standing for right?
Yeah.
So we were not looking for any acceptance from the world. We were looking for justice and acceptance from God. And that becomes the driving spirit, because I know that the force of God is far greater than any radio station, any newspaper, or any member of the political world. If I stand on this, then those that are in the political world should respond to what I'm standing on. And we found in this effort, we've gotten many interesting responses from those in the political world. One member of the BART board came to me after one of those heated meetings one day and said, Minister, I want you to know that I don't agree with everything that you say, but I feel compelled to listen. Well, that compulsion is not because of the power of Brother Keith. Brother Keith has no more power than you do.
Right.
But the God that we serve has the power to reach the heart. And when Jesus says that the truth shall make you free, there's a compelling message that comes along, or a compelling feeling that goes along with truth when it is delivered. So when we went before the BART board, or when we've gone before Oakland City Council, or when we've gone before the state legislature, the only thing that we desired to bring there was truth. And if that truth would move those that vote, then that's a good thing, because that only means that those that are casting these votes, that there's a place in their heart that God might offer them opportunity to stand to do right. Jesus said to those that opposed him, who happened to be Jews in the 8th chapter of John, that ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They said back to him in debate, how say you we be made free? We've never been held in bondage to any man. And they wrangled with Jesus until finally he said, I know you. Ye are of your father, and the works of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning. In fact, he said, the truth I speak has no place with you. Well, our duty is to hurl the truth. The Quran says that we hurl truth against falsehood until it knocks out its brain. So if there is a place in the heart of those who serve in government, those that serve in leadership for the truth, then yes, the truth itself is compelling. And I pray that God bless me to be a carrier of that word.
Yes, he has. You know, it reminds me of the Lebanese philosopher Khalil Gibran. And he said about crime and punishment that it is the people who make the laws that are the real criminals. And I thought about that. I pondered that. They know the interworkings of how the law should be, and that's why they can break that law. But yet they can impose that law and arrest you or me with it, when in fact it was them, they, that in fact are the real criminals. So it's kind of a reverse of who we think is just, meaning the law and the people who deliver the law, the judges and the lawyers and all of that. when in fact there seems to be something else dynamic going on here in terms of, yes, because we understand the boundaries of what people will do because we are those people. So it's like writing a law to protect themselves against people who may be innocent, and the person delivering that law is in fact the criminal.
Well, of course, the murder of Oscar Grant is a perfect representation of that idea. Johannes Mehserle, his killer, was there at the BART platform to uphold the law.
Right.
The Bible speaks very clearly in the book of Psalms about those who have law in their hands and make mischief with it, or they frameth mischief with law. So as we began to hear the testimony and read the reports of Johannes Mehserle's partners in law, well, they began to cover up the murder of Oscar Grant immediately, up to and including the BART chief of police, up to and including the BART spokesperson. That's some of the sad things that occurs when they hire a black spokesperson to speak to white people's interest. Not necessarily white people's interest, but BART's interest. And as we watched the black faces speak, it became very clear who was writing the script. We have to become more than an actor in somebody else's reality. One of the problems we have with some in elected offices, I've heard the minister use the term that you are a black manager of white people's store. So you can be the mayor, you can be the governor, you can be the president. Yeah, but if the only thing you're doing is managing their affairs, that's why some of our folk get so disappointed when there is a black mayor, a black governor, and now a black president, because we may be hopeful that these that we have elected will be our representative. But I heard the minister say that if you wanted a black president, you'd have voted for me, Louis Farrakhan, as president. Or you'd have voted for Reverend Jackson or Al Sharpton. That's not what we get with our brother. Mr. Obama is our brother, but he comes to office having been selected by forces that determined that he was electable. And when he becomes elected, you may recall when Henry Louis Gates suffered some police brutality at his door, and many felt, well, now we have a president that can speak to the historical construct of police brutality. Well, they found themselves having beer in the White House with the president, Henry Louis Gates, and that particular police officer. Well, I don't want any beer with Johannes Mehserle. I don't want any beer with Tony Peroni, who called Oscar the racial epithets that led to his shooting. I want justice.
Let me just ask you, because this is, what are the facts at this point? What has happened since the trial? What came up in the trial that might be stunning or might be new information, things that got clarified, and what is this, where do we think this is headed, with respect to Mehserle as well?
Well, I should say that I was inspired by God to write this book. And as I did some of the research, trying to refresh myself on the dates and happenings during the trial, as I knew the case pretty well, but I certainly just didn't remember all the court dates and those sorts of things. And when I went to the internet and looked for it, I realized that the activism that occurred in Oakland has been written off the pages of history. That is to say, if we relied on the Chronicle or the Tribune to give full exposure to what happened here, we wouldn't get it. Some of that was borne out that when we returned home from the verdict and held a press conference at True Vine Church here in West Oakland, when we came to address the press, their number one question to the Grant family was, what about the riots that happened in downtown Oakland? And I had to take them to task. We're not here to answer a question about a riot. We didn't have anything to do with that. We were in Los Angeles seeking justice in a courtroom for the state of California. Your questions for this family should be, did they receive justice? If not, why not? And what would satisfy them? You should not hold the Johnson family accountable for some stolen shoes at the Foot Locker. They don't have anything to do with that. That only demonstrates that your larger concern is the economy and the ruling power of this world, and not justice for a young man that was murdered before the eyes of the world. And it was made plain in the way that the coverage was coming. And so as we look at the case, I mean, there were many shocking moments. I'll give you an example. When Anthony Peroni, the cop who started the conflict, hurled racial epithets at Oscar Grant and was asked in the courtroom, did you say these things in the preliminary hearing? His first answer was, no, I would never use such language, just like Mark Furman in the O.J. case.
Sure, yeah.
Now, the thing that was shocking to me was that the press was in the courtroom when it was revealed what he said, and that the tapes were played in the courtroom.
And they could hear it.
And you could hear, and it was part of the testimony. It was 2 weeks before the Chronicle reported what he said. And when they reported it, it was allegedly a leak into Mateer and Ross, who were not in the courtroom. Well, since that time, brother, I have seen some of those reporters who were in the courtroom. I flew to LA with those reporters. But we've seen them everywhere. And some of the black ones even have not been able to reach the public with their story because they work for the major media. And so in working for the major media, they were not permitted to publish what they saw, experienced, and felt in that courtroom from their own pen. So when they came back and said to the newsroom that this officer called Oscar these racially offensive terms, it did not get printed because the newsroom editors were frightened of full exposure of what happened here and refused to let the world to know. Therefore, it was leaked out 2 weeks later.
My question is that we can't lose sight of the focuses, which is justice.
Exactly.
But why is the press so backward in wanting to do what it is supposed to do? You know, that which happens is news, you know, and this happened. And why would they not say what Peroni said? I mean, what are they fearing?
Well, perhaps we live under the illusion that we actually have freedom of the press. So we have to just know that what has occurred has gone underreported. Included in the book is the fact that on January the 7th, the night of the first riot, I was standing next to Mayor Ron Dellums when he walked out into the middle of the riot that
to try to calm
took
it down.
place.
Yeah.
And I received a phone call from my brother Christopher Muhammad in San Francisco, who was watching the news. I was on the rostrum teaching Islam. I didn't know at that moment that a riot was taking place, and Brother Christopher called me.
Wow.
I didn't answer the phone, I'm teaching.
Yeah.
Well, they ran to the rostrum with the telephone in their hand saying, this is an emergency, you need to take the call.
Yeah.
I took the call. He said, Mayor Dellums is in the middle of the street in a riot. Minister Farrakhan loves Mayor Dellums, and we cannot allow Mayor Dellums to get hurt. Now, what that meant was we love enough our brother, even though the moment was politically charged and controversial, that we would rather see our mayor make it into City Hall safely than stand outside in a riot where he could be hurt. And when we arrived there, brother, he called the police department off. He told OPD, back off and let me deal with my people. Well, okay, we're not OPD, we're FOI, Fruit of Islam. And the last thing we would allow is for our brother who's trying to do good to be hurt by his own people in some cases, or by others in other cases, while he's trying to do good for the community. So some say, well, why did you all go out there? Well, why did we walk with Reverend Jackson when he ran for president the first time? Why did Minister Farrakhan support the candidacy of Barack Obama? It's because we love black people who are trying to do good for their own, and we would be remiss in our duty if we didn't stand next to a man that's trying to do something, or a woman that's trying to do something of good for our people. That's why we went. And when I got there, Mayor Dellums was interviewed by a media person about his view. And he said on camera, I believe that I'm going to ask OPD to investigate the murder of this case as they would any other homicide, or not the murder, homicide of this case as they would investigate any other homicide. The reporter said, turn off the camera.
Wow.
Mr. Mayor, Are you sure you mean to call this a homicide? And Mayor Dellums responded, and this conveyed in the book, homicide means that a human being has been killed. It does not declare intent. It does not declare malice. It means that a human being has been killed. So yes, this is a homicide. They refused, brother, to report on the air the murder of Oscar Grant as a homicide. Well, what else is it? The reporter wanted the mayor to call it an accident. Well, the judge wasn't willing to call it an accident, at least not in the preliminary hearing. The jury, there was none yet, was not to receive an argument that this was an accident. And if I shot somebody the way that Mehserle shot Oscar Grant, who in the world would call that an accident? Or would I find myself behind bars trying to explain myself about this so-called accident? And at that time, Mehserle was not behind bars. He was in Lake Tahoe, enjoying fun and sun, while the family of Oscar Grant in the state of California was responding to his murder.
How has the family responded just in the last, few weeks or so? I mean, I know they must miss their son quite a bit, and or their nephew or their relative. But can you give us a temperature reading on that?
Well, Oscar's mom, who I asked to write a part of the book, but emotionally, she had to struggle with that, which I understood. And so her brothers, Uncle Bobby, Cephas Johnson, and her other brother actually wrote the beginning of the book called I Am Oscar Grant.
Wow.
But
beautiful.
when the book came out, and this is the first print edition, she was the first and came and captured dozens of copies from me to share with family and friends. And so she's greatly inspired by the writing. Uncle Bobby has started, or Brother Cephas, a foundation called the Oscar Grant Foundation, in which he's seeking to help young men who are in difficult lives to find a better way of life. So in Oscar's name and in Oscar's memory, they're seeking to help those that are transitioning from prison into free life, who need educational improvements, who need job training. And so their response has been, what can we do to prevent anyone else from having to endure what Oscar endured? Even as the court case unraveled, rather than deal with Mehserle's state of mind and Mehserle's past history, they wasted time talking about what was Oscar's past history with law enforcement. That is the image that the family has been fighting to overcome. The idea that Oscar was some young criminal who finally met, his maker in the hand of a law enforcement officer.
I was just kind of asking you, it looks like across the world stage, there's so many different dynamics happening. The tsunami in particular in Japan, the major earthquake, it seems that things are rushing to some type of an end. Not only in the local, but in the world events. We have to get ready. This is the tip of the iceberg. What should we be prepared to do, and what should we do right now in order to be able to understand and make sense of all of these world and current local events?
One of the things that I have learned as a student of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we're a faithful people.
Yes.
We study the Bible and the Holy Quran religiously. And one of the themes that occurs in both books is they bring you up to the door of the last days of this world, but not into what is known as the hereafter. Now, as a matter of my faith, I don't see the hereafter simply to mean after I am physically gone. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that hereafter means here, after the destruction of the wicked. So when you look at it in the Bible, you'll find that Jesus prophesied that there would be wars and rumors of wars. And without going through all the details of them, we have those going on right now.
Sure.
That there would be famine, that there would be earthquakes in diverse places.
Yes.
And as you can see, we're going through all of that right now. But then Jesus said that would just be the beginning of sorrows. In other words, it's one thing to look at an earthquake in Japan. It's one thing to look at wars in other parts of the world. But Minister Farrakhan warned the president in America just recently that as you're looking at these things in other parts of the world, know that these will soon be at your door.
At your doorstep.
I looked at the paper this morning, and here was a home in San Pablo where the residents were looking into their backyard, and their backyard was gone. When the tsunami hit Japan, there was a tsunami warning in Oakland. And unbeknown to most that live in the city of Oakland, there are areas in the city of Oakland already determined to be areas of flooding should a tsunami hit this area. Well, so we may think, well, that was a long ways away. We'll say that to the people in Monterey or Santa Cruz, pardon me. Or say that to the people in Crescent Valley, or Crescent City, I believe it's called, where there are people that died in California from the tsunami that hit Japan.
Right.
Now, there's fear of nuclear fallout and what that would mean if the residue of that nuclear fallout reaches America. I heard President Obama say, we don't expect dangerous levels of radiation to reach California. And immediately CNN reported, President Obama said there'll be no radiation. That's not what he said. He said he doesn't expect dangerous levels. Now, if you were a scientist who studied this radioactive activity, you would have to admit, like I'm telling you right now, there is no safe level. So even if the level that has reached here, and it has reached here, is a small amount, it's not that what has reached here is a safe level. It's like asbestos. The town hall meetings that we held over the years since Oscar was killed weekly, they began from asbestos exposure of the poor people of Bayview Hunters Point in San Francisco. That's covered in the book. And the unfortunate thing is, rather than say to the public, the San Francisco Health Department never said you're in danger of asbestos exposure and we're here to protect you. The San Francisco Health Department protected the developer. It's, oh, no, we don't see anything. Well, they're still fighting that one out in court, and that is only to say that there's trouble approaching the land. We should do something for ourselves as people who care to live. When that tsunami warning hit Northern California, there was in our community those that prepared. That in case that water level rose, our unity and our love for life and self caused us to act, and I hope we can get more to do the same.
Well, thank you. You know, you just placed it in such a marvelous structure so that we can at least appreciate it and understand it. I want to thank you for coming on the program, giving us an update, also for your new book, Grant Justice, Lessons Learned, Fighting for Justice in the Murder of Oscar Grant, and also sharing the final call, 2 different editions. And so we'll see you next time, and for Michael Lange and for Minister Keith Muhammad, so long.